Okay, so thanks for joining us today, everyone. This is a webinar presented by MEFA for school counselors, although anyone who works with students, college access professionals, any kind of mentors in the community are welcome to jump on, as are families. This will just be a presentation about what's happening in financial aid, any updates that have occurred over the past year, including legislation and everything presented by federal student aid, and what you need to know if you're helping families through the financial aid process. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and put them into your questions section in your GoToWebinar panel, and I'll be happy to answer those at the end. Just a little bit about MEFA for those who aren't familiar, although I bet many of you are. We're a not-for-profit agency. We were started in 1982, and our sole purpose is really to help families plan, save, and pay for college. We have a lot of resources for both school counselors and for families. Our website is mefa.org. That has a lot of information, tools, resources. We have plenty of blogs and articles. If you need to know anything about financial aid, college admissions, college planning, college saving, head to our website. We have a lot of information for you. 800 number is 800-449-MEFA or 6332. Call us anytime 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We have a handful of great college planning representatives who are happy to assist you with any questions. Our email address is collegeplanning@mefa.org. Use that anytime. And we are on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We post a few times a day on all of those sites. LinkedIn maybe once a day, but Facebook and Twitter 2 or 3 times a day. And we post a lot of scholarships for students, as well as a lot of different resources that families can use and that you, school counselors, can use as you're helping families. If you have families you're working with, I would encourage you to have them sign up for our emails. We don't email families that often, maybe once or twice a month, but we have a lot of great information that's relevant to them based on the ages of the children in their family. And we have emails for you as well, our school counselors. We email you maybe once a month with, again, just resources to help you as you guide families through the college planning process. Families can sign up for emails right on mefa.org, and counselors, you can go to our school counselors page. If you go to mefa.org and click on school counselors at the top, or you go to mefa.org/counselors, you'll find it. And that's where you can sign up for emails, as there are different email sign-up pages for families and school counselors. We have seminars for families. We have a lot of college admission seminars coming up right now, and they can find those on our events page, mefa.org/events. And then for family and counselor webinars, such as this one, everyone can go to our events page as well, and we have those listed. You can click on either family webinars or counselor webinars. You'll see those categories on the right-hand side in order to find the webinars that are appropriate to you. So let's talk about some legislation that has to do with higher education and financial aid that's happened really in the last month. The Future Act, some of you may have heard about, it was signed into law December 19th. And it does a few things. One, it extends mandatory funding for minority serving institutions. It also increases funding for the Pell Grant program, and I'll talk a bit about that, what that maximum Pell Grant will be for the upcoming academic year. But that's good news, because the Pell Grant is a federal grant that's given to mostly lower income families. So this Future Act did increase funding for the Pell Grant so that more money can be given to those students from lower income families who are trying to attend college. And then the Future Act also enabled direct data sharing between the IRS and the Department of Education. And this is just going to help students and families as they go through the federal financial aid process. One thing it's going to do is simplify the FAFSA. If you're familiar with the FAFSA, there's something called the IRS data retrieval tool. And it allows families, not all families, but a good amount of families, to pull their IRS tax return data directly into the FAFSA. So it makes it easier for them to really fill out the FAFSA, because instead of having to answer specific questions about their tax return, they can very easily pull their tax return data into the FAFSA, and those answers are generated automatically. This is going to take it one step further. It's basically going to give the Department of Education the ability, with people's permission, each person will have to give permission, but it will give the Department of Education the ability to pull in directly IRS data. So families won't have to go in and manually do it when they're doing the FAFSA. It will just give the Department of Education the permission to grab it at the onset. So they'll have that data of families. This will make filling out the FAFSA easier. There are populations of families who can't use the IRS data retrieval tool. For example, families who filed taxes married filing separately, that will eliminate that. So now practically every family who have filed a US tax return will be able to basically fill out the FAFSA more easily by allowing the Department of Education to pull in their tax data automatically. So families won't have to answer those tax return questions manually. They can just tell the Department of Education, go ahead and grab my tax return, and then you can get the information that you need. This will also make the verification process much simpler for families. If you're a counselor that has helped families through verification, and for those who don't know, verification is simply the process where colleges and universities have to verify the information that's reported on the financial aid applications. So families have to submit tax returns or tax return transcripts or certain documents. This whole Future Act is going to help with verification, as a lot of that tax return data will already be collected by the Department of Education. So in likeliness, less families will have to go through the verification process because their tax return information will have already been collected by the Department of Education. So that's great news. And then finally, it will help with student loan repayment. For those who are in student loan repayment and have opted into one of the repayment plans in which their repayment amount or their payment amount is determined based on their income, those students and borrowers, or graduates of college, I should say, or those who have borrowed a federal loan, have to basically submit their tax return every year in order to ensure that they can stay in the repayment plan that they've selected, usually an income-based repayment plan. With this new Future Act and the process that will now be in place, the Department of Education and the servicers will be able to grab tax return data from the IRS automatically. So it will just make the process easier for those borrowers who want to keep up with those repayment plans. They won't have to submit their tax return data every year. So all of the logistics around these changes will still have to be made, but that's what's coming down the road for all the changes that were made within this Future Act. One day later, another act was signed into law. That's the Secure Act. And you probably heard about it. It changed some rules regarding our retirement, but how it relates to college and college savings and higher education is that now with the Future Act, you can use your 529 college savings plan to pay back student loans. So for example, if you have or know of a student, or you yourself went to college, maybe your family had a 529 and you used some of that to pay for school, and now you have student loans that you're repaying, and there's a little bit of that 529 left. You can use that without penalty and without paying any taxes to pay back up to $10,000 of your student loan. So that's good news. A lot of buzz around this act has been in regards to grandparents. Some grandparents have saved in 529 accounts for their grandchildren, and there are some ramifications when grandparents pay for college out of a 529 account. But if they gift that money, $10,000, over to their grandchildren for their grandchildren to pay back student loans, there's no ramifications on the financial aid process, as there can be if they actually gave that money to the grandchild to pay for tuition and fees and any other college expenses. So good news, again, only $10,000 can be used in total to pay back student loans from the 529, but still, that's better than it was before when it was nothing. As well, with the Secure Act, 529 distributions can be used to pay for textbooks, fees, and equipment for anyone in an apprenticeship program. There are students, of course, who don't take the traditional path, and it's not even really the traditional path anymore, but they don't go attend a four-year college or university. They might enroll in an apprenticeship program, and that leads to a very fulfilling career for them. There are, of course, costs associated with that program. And so now the 529 accounts can be used for any fees, any textbooks, any equipment associated with those apprenticeship programs. And with the Secure Act, these changes are retroactive to any distributions from the 529 made after last December, so December 31st, 2018. So not this past December, but the one before. So those are the two most recent acts that have to do with higher education. Now let's talk about the FAFSA and the updates to the FAFSA. First, if you've gone to the FAFSA recently, you'll notice that it does direct to studentaid.gov. It's been doing that for about a year, but there is a new look. So federal student aid has been making a lot of changes to their websites, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But if you go to FAFSA.gov, it will direct you right over to studentaid.gov, another great resource for students in regards to federal financial aid. And this is what you'll see. You will be told right up front to complete the FAFSA. So even if you're going to studentaid.gov for another purpose, students, counselors, families, everyone will be reminded. Do you need to complete your FAFSA? Go ahead and do that now. So this is now your new FAFSA homepage. So with the FAFSA 2020-2021, now that's the FAFSA that high school seniors are filling out right now if they're going right into college in fall of 2020. If you've helped students with the FAFSA or you're helping them right now, you may have noticed some changes. Now, remember, the FAFSA 2020-2021 asks for 2018 tax return information. So it's looking for income information from 2018. The IRS made some changes to the 2018 tax return, so the FAFSA in turn had to make changes itself. One big thing that you might notice is that it removed references to the 1040A and EZ tax forms. We used to have the 1040, the 1040A, and the 1040 EZ, slightly confusing. Now there's just one form, the 1040, and it does include a Schedule 1 that has a lot of extra information, but it is a simplified form. The FAFSA used to ask about the 1040 and the 1040A and 1040EZ, and that was to determine if a student could be eligible for an automatic zero EFC or a simple needs test EFC, meaning that assets weren't counted in the financial aid formula. Because those forms are eliminated, now there are questions referencing Schedule 1. So you'll see if you do the FAFSA with students that there are questions in reference to Schedule 1, so you can look at the family's tax return in order to answer that question. The 2018 tax return also combined the question that asked about untaxed portions of IRS distributions and pensions, or that should be IRA distributions and pensions. So it did combine that question, so the FAFSA did as well. In 2019, that question will be separated again, so the FAFSA will again have to separate that question. If you go to FAFSA.gov and you log in, you'll see that the Social Security number is now masked, meaning as students type it, they won't see those numbers, and that's just for security purposes. And then the FAFSA, I went to a conference all about the FAFSA, and they do listen to all of the feedback that is given. And so what they did with the 2020-2021 FAFSA is they took a lot of the comments that they had received from students, from families, from school counselors, and tried to make changes. And so these next three are just things that they did based on feedback they received from students, families, and counselors. One is that they better explain the definition of preparer. If you've gone through the FAFSA, you know toward the end, there is a question, are you a preparer? And that basically means, are you being paid to do the FAFSA for a student? Students and families weren't sure what that meant, so there's a better explanation for a preparer now. The FAFSA also better explains the difference between the save key and the FSA ID. The FSA ID is that username and password that students use to log into the FAFSA, and then they use it to sign the FAFSA electronically, as does one parent. The save key is a simple password that's made up that allows students and families, if they leave the FAFSA halfway through completing it, they can go back in and start from where they left off. So it is two completely different things. So the FAFSA for 2020-2021 is trying to basically give a better explanation to families about those different passwords. And then finally, it better explained combat pay. For whatever reason, a lot of students and families were submitting numbers into the combat pay questions when they didn't have anyone in the family who was in the military or earning combat pay. So a better explanation was given to what combat pay actually is so that families know whether or not that applies to them. So the myStudentAid mobile app debuted a little over a year ago, and this gives students the ability with their parents to actually fill out the FAFSA on a mobile device. They can begin, they can complete, they can submit an entirely new or a renewal FAFSA. So that's good news. That has been working. Thousands and thousands of families have been using this mobile app in order to complete and submit the FAFSA. One thing that's changed about the app is that the signature box was removed. It used to be there was an actual signature box where you signed the FAFSA with your finger, and it just wasn't working well. And so the federal student aid did remove that from the app. Within this myStudentAid mobile app, students can view their SAR, their student aid report, which is basically a summary of their FAFSA answers. They can view their federal aid history. So once students go to college and they're perhaps taking out federal loans, maybe they're taking a Pell Grant, they'll be able to see their federal aid history within this app once they log in, of course. And then there's college scorecard data. So remember, the college scorecard is that resource previewed by or introduced by the Department of Education a few years ago, and it provides helpful financial information about colleges and universities across the country, such as the average tuition, average aid, the income that alumni are making, and the average debt of students who have gone to that school. So students can now view that data right in this myStudentAid app, which is great, especially if they're considering different schools. And then finally, there are some budgeting tools and a payment vehicle coming soon. So the idea is that students who have borrowed loans will eventually be able to pay back those loans through this myStudentAid mobile app. So that's constantly in development. So next year at this time, hopefully we'll have a lot more updates about it. So let's talk about verification. Verification, as I mentioned, is that process where colleges and universities have to collect usually tax return information, sometimes other financial information from families. And they usually have to collect the documents to verify the information that families have reported on their financial aid applications. So a lot of the time, colleges and universities are collecting tax returns or other documents. Sometimes it's asset documents to basically verify the financial information that families submitted. In regards to tax documentation, it used to be that families pretty much had to always submit a tax return transcript, which they had to request from the IRS. It was a big process. Now, colleges are able to collect again the tax returns as it was originally. They may request a tax return transcript, but it's only if they have concerns about the validity of the tax return that's already been submitted. For families that have filed an extension for their tax return, so they aren't able to submit their tax return to schools because they don't have it yet completed, they do need to submit the copy of the IRS approval that actually gave them a tax return extension. And normally when you're approved for an extension, you're approved for 6 months. But then if you need to extend beyond that 6 months, you need additional approval. So that's what families are going to have to submit. If they needed an extension beyond the automatic 6-month extension that's been given, they'll have to show that the IRS approved that. They'll also have to submit a verification of non-filing, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then they'll have to submit their W-2s or any other signed statement of income if they're self-employed and don't have a W-2. So if a family needs to submit a verification of non-filing, whether they're filing an extension and yet haven't completed their tax return, or they don't plan to complete their tax return because they don't need to. Now, this is only needed for independent students and for parents of dependent students. So if you have a student in high school who didn't file taxes because, let's say, he's never worked, he's never earned income, he lives with his parents, he's a dependent student, he won't have to submit a verification of non-filing because the Department of Education knows so many students aren't filing taxes. So only independent students and then those parents will need to submit a verification of non-filing if they didn't file taxes. They will have to request a verification of non-filing letter from the IRS. So they can go on the IRS website and basically submit this request, and they'll get a letter saying, yes, it's true, this person did not file taxes for 2018. If they can't get that verification of non-filing letter for whatever reason, they do have to submit a signed statement, and it has to say they didn't file taxes and they did try to get that VNF, that verification of non-filing. Recent news with verification is that the Federal Student Aid Office used a machine learning model, which they're calling MLM, in the 2019-20 verification. So that was verification for it's this current academic year. And basically, this helped them, they believe, to select more appropriate filers. So if you were helping students with verification last year, maybe last year's high school seniors who were applying for the 2019-20 academic year, you may have noticed less of them were selected for verification. This machine learning model helped Federal Student Aid basically reduce the number of students who were selected for verification by 8%. So it used to be 30% of students were selected, now it went down to 22%. That resulted in 900,000 fewer students across the country being selected for verification for the 1920 year, and that's compared to the 1819 year. So that's good news. Federal Student Aid is committed to continuing this. So every year they'll basically retrain that machine learning model. And the model is just helping them figure out who needs to be selected for verification. And that would be people who put an error or made an error when filling out their FAFSA or put inaccurate information. And so by going through verification, it is necessary in order to award them the appropriate federal financial aid. But Federal Student Aid is committed to really helping those students not get selected for verification who don't need to be. Just some numbers on federal financial aid. So for this academic year, for federal direct student loans, so students who are currently in college, the interest rate for undergrad is 4.529%. For the graduate direct loan, it's 6.079%. And then for the plus loan, it's 7.079%. These interest rates are set every year based on the 10-year Treasury note. We usually know in June. So this coming June, we'll know the interest rate for those loans for your high school seniors who are going into college next year and who are borrowing a direct loan. The loan fees as of this past October, 1.059% for undergrad and grad, and then 4.236% for plus. And remember, those fees are taken from the total loan amount. So if you have a student who's borrowing $5,500, for example, that student doesn't actually get $5,500. He gets almost that amount. It's basically $5,500 minus that fee. It's only a 1.059% fee, so it's small, but it's helpful for families to know they don't get the total $5,500 because there'll be a small fee subtracted. And then finally, the Pell Grant, as I mentioned earlier, the maximum for the upcoming academic year, so if you have high school seniors who are going into college who are eligible for a Pell Grant, the max they could receive, that would be if they had a 0 expected family contribution, would be $6,345, and that's for the 2020-2021 academic year. So let's talk about some Department of Education resources. Some of these you've probably used before. The College Scorecard, I mentioned that earlier. This allows students to compare colleges really based on financial information. So it displays for each college across the country the average net price of that college, the 6-year graduation rate, student debt information. So what are students borrowing at this school? And then the median alumni salary. After students graduate, what's the median income? What are alumni making after they've left this school? Newly released over the last few months was median earnings and debt based on field of study. So not only can I go to University of Massachusetts, Boston, for example, in the College Scorecard, and look up what alumni are earning or what they borrowed at this school, I can actually go by field of study. So I could type in University of Massachusetts nursing or engineering or math. What did those students who graduated in those majors, not even sure if UMass has those majors, but if they do, what did those alumni who majored in those majors, what are they earning right now and what was their debt when they left school? So that's helpful if a student knows, okay, I want to study engineering and she's looking at 5 different schools. She can look at the engineering program of all 5 of those schools and find out what those alumni are making and what they actually borrowed in student loans. College Scorecard URL is just collegescorecard.ed.gov. Then we have the College Navigator. This is a great online college search tool. It has so much information for schools, and students can filter. When they look at a school, they can find out admissions information, so requirements, academics, so different majors, graduation rate, average net price, so some of that same information that's in this College Scorecard, loan default rate. So this is just a great tool if students are trying to whittle down. You can see in the image on the left-hand side, they can select, for example, the institution type, whether they're getting a bachelor's or associate's, and there's other search options as well. So students can select criteria and then look at the details of each college. They can also save a search. It can be emailed to them to return to later, which is helpful. And that's collegenavigator.gov to get to that site. Then we have what's called the college financing plan. So this used to be the financial aid shopping sheet. We just really didn't like that name. And so the Department of Education renamed this resource the College Financing Plan, which is better. This is basically an award letter template, for lack of a better term. So for colleges and universities that are presenting financial aid offers to families, they can opt to use this template. And many schools are doing it. And it just makes it easier for students to compare apples to apples when they're looking at different schools that have accepted them and offered them some financial aid. So you can see at the top, there is the expected family contribution. So schools are letting students know this is what we calculated based on the financial information you put on your financial aid applications. Then it lays out the cost of attendance at that school. So for the upcoming school year, what do we anticipate tuition, fees, housing, books, etc. to be? Then it lays out the scholarships and the grants the student has received. And then it gives basically a net price, a net cost. What will the student pay after free money, scholarships and grants is taken into consideration? What will that family owe to attend that school? And then at the bottom, there are loan options and work options. So if the student did receive a federal direct loan or a work study award, that is presented on this financial or college financing plan as well. And it does include some school data, so graduation rate, loan default rate, median borrower debt. So you're getting the theme here that federal student aid is really trying to educate families on information about schools. What are students borrowing? What are they earning after graduation? So that students can really know the value of each school that they're considering. This college financing plan worksheet also includes a glossary on the back that gives some definitions to commonly seen terms within the financial aid process. And then the Department of Education has a great blog. We often reference the blog and share posts that we see. It just includes helpful information about federal financial aid and paying for college. So some sample posts that they've had recently: 8 steps to filling out the FAFSA, scholarship basics and tips, how to stay on track this summer for incoming college freshmen. So really short posts that are helpful to families as they go through the college planning process, and helpful to you as school counselors as well. And that blog is posted at blog.ed.gov. And then finally, this is a financial aid toolkit. You may have used this. This is really for you, school counselors, educators, college access professionals. And this is financial aid information. There's outreach tactics. There's resources that you can use. Say you're hosting a financial aid night or trying to give more financial aid information to families. There are resources for you. There are webinars put on by Federal Student Aid. So you can explore that resource at financialaidtoolkit.ed.gov. So let's chat about what's coming soon or has really just arrived. One thing is Aid in the chatbot, and this just debuted to a small number of students this past December. This is, like you've maybe seen on other websites, a chatbot. So it's an automatic tool that is going to help students navigate the federal financial aid process. It will extend its reach throughout this upcoming year, 2020. So more and more students will see the opportunity to be able to chat with Aiden, the chatbot, and they'll see it's represented by a small owl image. And again, this will give students, families, you school counselors the opportunity to type in questions about federal student aid, and it's designed to make the federal financial aid process more accessible. So for example, if I'm a student and I've borrowed from some student loans and I have questions about those student loans, I can go onto the Federal Student Aid website and chat with Aid in the chatbot. So again, it just debuted to a small number of students just to test it out, and then you'll be hearing more. We'll be posting about it as we hear that it's expanding to students and families throughout the next several months. Website consolidation. So this is a big one if you are ever on the federal financial aid websites. The Federal Student Aid Office has decided that wisely they need to combine a handful of their websites, because really students were having to go to different websites to find a lot of different information, but it was all under the federal financial aid umbrella. So what they've decided to do is take studentloans.gov, studentaid.gov, fsa.ed.gov, and nslds.ed.gov, and combine all of those, and they will all now direct to studentaid.gov. And studentaid.gov is already that great resource where families can go for federal financial aid information. But now all of those websites will direct to studentaid.gov. And the goal is just to make it easier for students to manage and navigate this whole process, to learn about their federal financial aid, to pay back their loans. There will be a personalized dashboard for every student, and eventually students will be able to make their student loan payments right on this website. That's great news. They won't have to go to their loan servicer, figure out who to repay. They'll just go to studentaid.gov. You'll notice that if you go to studentaid.gov, or rather if you go to studentloans.gov, right now you'll automatically already be directed to studentaid.gov. So slowly this will be unveiled over the next several months, where all of these websites will then live under studentaid.gov. The Informed Borrower tool is another new tool that's being debuted, and it helps really two sets of students. Potential borrowers will be able to estimate their monthly loan payments. So if I'm a student and I'm thinking about borrowing a loan, but I really want to know how much my loan payments will be, and that's a great question I should be asking, I can use this Informed Borrower tool. I can be anonymous, and I can just type in, I'm thinking about borrowing this amount every year. What would my monthly loan payment be after graduation? As well, borrowers will be able to see their total federal loan balance and their loan payment due date. So once I'm a student that's already borrowed loans, and perhaps I'm in repayment and I want to see how much I owe and when my due dates are, and just more information about my loans, this Informed Borrower tool will help me to do that. Eventually, by about this April, students will have to actually view this tool before they're able to borrow a federal loan. And that will be a requirement coming out of federal student aid, because they really want students to be informed if they do plan to borrow. So if you have high school seniors who are getting their financial aid offers and getting some federal loans in there, as most of them will, then they will likely be required by the college or university to view this tool, to use this Informed Borrower tool, before the money from those loans can be placed into their student account to pay for this coming fall and spring when they do go to college at the end of 2020. So more information to come. We'll be providing more information through our social media and our emails. By 2020, 2021, borrowers who already have student loans will actually be able to see their data. So at first, this will be a tool for students who are going into college to recognize that they are taking on debt and what their monthly payment will be. And then eventually, those who have already borrowed will be able to use this tool to view all of their federal loan information. Income share agreements is something else that will debut slowly, and this will be a pilot program in partnership with just a few select colleges. But basically, when students borrow federal student loans, there will be a few select colleges that assume those loans from the federal government. So they'll take on those loans, and students will then pay back a portion of their salary, of their income, to these colleges in order to pay back their loans. So again, this is a pilot program, more information to come, but just a few colleges are participating in these income share agreements right now. And then we have a loan simulator, and this is really to help student loan borrowers who want to figure out a repayment plan. As many of you know, federal student aid offers several federal loan repayment plans, and a lot of them are based on your income. So it might be that you can pay your loan off over 10 years. That's the standard repayment plan. But if your loan amount, your payment amount that's due is too high and your income is low, you can actually submit tax return information to show that your income is too low to really afford your loan payment, and the federal government will work with you and basically decrease your monthly payment on your loans. So the loan simulator is going to help students. They'll be able to use the tool anonymously, so they can just put in their information if they want, or they could log in to federal student aid and pull their loan information in directly into this tool. And the tool will help them figure out, okay, this is your monthly payment, this is your income. Do you need a different repayment plan? So that'll be a great resource for student borrowers. And so that's all of the updates we have on federal student aid. Again, I want to stress, for those of you who are on social media, would invite you to follow us, like us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're also on YouTube. We have a lot of helpful videos. And we're posting a lot about scholarships, a lot about different resources, tools, tips, reminders, news, and updates. So definitely follow us just to stay on track with college planning and to help your family stay on track as well. And then things to do now, we have a few more webinars, so I invite you to register for those on MEFA.org/events. We've got MEFA resources for families all over our website, so definitely share those. And then go to your webpage on MEFA.org, MEFA.org/counselors. This is where you can sign up for MEFA emails, watch other recorded webinars. We record all our webinars, so you can watch them there. And then you can access other resources that we have for you. So that concludes the webinar. As I said, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into your questions section of your GoToWebinar panel. I'm happy to answer them. As well, if you found this webinar helpful, we're trying to really beef up our Google reviews. So if you're on Google, would invite you to get on there and leave a review letting us know how this webinar was. We're just trying to get more reviews out there so that folks know about MEFA as a resource through college planning. So I'll open our questions section right now. Again, any questions, go ahead and type them in there. If you have to jump off, feel free to email or call us anytime as well. We're happy to answer any questions from school counselors at any point. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions right now. Again, if you think of anything later or want to contact us, do definitely call us or email us anytime. And we're happy to answer any questions from you about college planning. So thanks so much for joining the webinar today. We're so happy to have you, and have a good rest of your day.